I've known Nikki for about 7 years now. I think we met in an airport originally, but on our way to Peru, to Iquitos, for a volunteer trip with Kindness in Action.
Why were you guys there?
Well, we were both volunteering,
Yep.
and I think we both. I want to get into that with you because I feel like we both volunteered with multiple organizations. And Jen, I know you've done a ton of volunteering. Like you said, like we met in Peru, but I've always kind of kept track of your career, Jen, and I've always been so impressed. There's just so much I wanted to talk with you about. But tell us about yourself though, Jan. Like introduce yourself, tell us about who you are, where you work, all the fun
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah. I and my partners run TREC Dental. So we're in Calgary. We've got 18 clinics in Calgary, 16 GP and two specialty clinics. Been doing this for 21 years now, which like blows my mind that I've been a dentist for that long. I was lucky to go down to UOP in San Francisco for university. And so got out of school, graduated at 22 and started doing dentistry. So I'm 43 now, but I've been working for 21 years. So,
22?
that's,
Wow.
yeah, 22. Yeah, it was pretty
Wow.
crazy. Well, they've got a 2+3 program. So 2 years undergrad, 3 years dental school, and you're done.
So you were like
And
a kid wonder. You're like a baby genius.
so here's the thing: people say that, and I appreciate it. I'll just pretend yes that that's the case, but not really. Like when you go to the U.S., and a lot of people don't, I think, know this. A full course load in the U.S. is 4 courses. Like
Really?
in like each semester. Like in Canada, you have to take 5 courses to do a full course load, right? In the U.S., you have to do
Yeah.
full 4 courses. So I had to do 16 undergrad courses, and I got into dental school. Like that's like a year and a half in Canada, and it wasn't like I
Totally.
so I didn't have to like do really well in a lot of courses. I had to do really well in a few courses. And I was lucky. I was, in Calgary. I was in a private school, did AP Bio, AP Chem, which truly set me up because I got down there and first year they're like, all right, you're in bio class. Here's your textbook. And I'm like, I read this textbook last year. This was my grade 12 textbook. So it's like, how could you not do well if you're redoing the course? Like, I mean, you'd have to be, unfortunately, not that good if you manage to not do well the second time doing a course that you passed already. So undergrad went quick. Dental school went quick. Great program actually at UOP, 3 years. Actually, interestingly enough, and this is the kind of crazy part about it, is that my roommate from dental school, his daughter just got into the program at UOP, which starts
Really?
to age you a little bit because I have a roommate in dental school that has an 18-year-old daughter, and I've got two kids. I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old, two little boys, and so that's probably the different part about it. You do things differently. Like I worked a lot, and things happen. We grew, and here we are. My father's a dentist. My mom's was our office manager, and so I learned a lot from my parents, and that's really where my background started. But when I joined them, we had one clinic, and things just kind of took off from there without planning.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So, Nikki, you know where I got that from? The call we were on the other day. Nikki and I were on a call and someone physically put their hand up. So I'm sorry to that too. But um, and you glossed over a point, which I think is super important that a lot of people do when they talk about their pivots in their journey, which is, I worked super hard. Like, what did that tangibly mean?
I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, I don't think I worked super hard in university, to be completely honest. I worked as hard as I needed to get stuff done. But when I got back home, um, I joined mom and dad, and they treated me like an associate. Like it wasn't like you're your dad's son and you get the easy road. Like I did 6 days a week. I was working 4 Saturdays a month. And to me, I mean, one of the challenges I have, and again, this is gonna, maybe throw other people under a bus with the whole like millennial thing, but like to get any dentist to work 6 days a week and 3 to 4 Saturdays a month, like that's literally impossible right now. Like it just never happens. And it's interesting for me because it's like, well, why wouldn't you work hard to do well? And not that you don't have to have a life outside it. I mean, I had a great life. I used to travel everywhere, take good holidays, but you put the time in. And for me, that wasn't just doing dentistry, it was watching my dad. Because to me, mentorship is the most important thing that you can get when you come out of school. And I find a lot of, this is again a bit of a pet peeve of mine in let's say the DSO world, which I do live in, even though I don't love the terminology or what that necessarily means in people's minds. A lot of people will just throw associates into an office because they have an office and it's like in the middle of nowhere and they're like, I just need a dentist. You graduated, go. And you're like,
Yeah.
What do you know coming out of dental school? Like, to be completely honest, dental school, like, makes you legal as a dentist. It doesn't make you a dentist. It doesn't make you good at dentistry. You learn all of your dentistry, or the majority of your dentistry, when you get out of school, when you actually start practicing on patients. And to me, mentorship's a huge part of that. And here where I'm blessed because I had a dad that wanted me to succeed in dentistry and a mom that wanted me to succeed in understanding how to run a business. And so I got lucky. I had two of the best mentors in the world who want you to succeed. Like, it doesn't get much better than that.
I always say dental school teaches you just enough to not kill someone. And it's the truth. That's where we're at. You don't really learn to be a dentist in dental school. But I think it's great that you had those mentors and now you're that mentor for so many other people. When you see these new grads come out and they're kind of aimlessly looking for a mentor, how do you recommend people find a mentor, or what do you think people should do to find that mentor like you had?
I think that, and this is the hard part, is like, stop focusing on the hours and the money and focus on who am I going to get to work next to? How many years experience does this guy have? What's the clinic's Google reviews like? Like, I mean, we're big on Google reviews. Like, how do people look at this clinic? Is is there some level of longevity? Is this the partner or the owner, or the mentor that you're going to be working with? Has he been doing this a number of years, and does he have a skill set that you want to learn? And then let's not worry about year 1 and 2, what I make coming out of school. We'll get there. Like, we're going to be successful. I mean, I think the nice thing about dentistry is we're in Canada, we're doing dentistry. You do a good job, you take care of people, you're going to make good money. Like, I don't think that you can't if you do the right things. I think that, we're lucky to be in the profession that we are. So let's not try to, worry about that year 1, 2. Let's try to get our skills set up. And so, find a person that wants to mentor you, that says, hey, I'm going to work next to you 2 or 3 days a week, and you're going to work by yourself 1 or 2 days a week. Or in a perfect world, I'm going to work next to you 4 to 5 days a week. You're just going to be working, beside me. And then take the time, because, hey, we have a bunch of associates, and I love our team is fantastic. But, I talked to some of my docs, and I'm like, hey, you work 4 days a week. On your 5th day, once a month, could you come and observe for 3 to 4 hours? Right? Like, so not 4 days a week, not 4 days a month, like once a month, even once a quarter. And here's the honest truth: we don't get as much uptake as we'd like. It just doesn't happen. There's like, oh, it's my day off. Like, I get to go to the mountains. I get to go do something. And yeah, absolutely. Like, we should balance life. I mean, I think that's really important these days. Stress is high. Make sure we balance life, but take a few hours to go meet somebody, to go hang out with somebody, to learn from somebody. It doesn't even have to be in your organization. Hopefully you have some friends, right? Like, if you're in town and like, you're in Lloyd, like, go visit Neki, right? Like, just like, people are going to say yes if you're willing to observe, if you're willing to learn. I know a lot of great people that I think are willing to teach. I think we all want people to be better at what they do. I mean, I hope we all want people that are better at what they do, so that dentistry comes across as a better, like a good profession. Because I think that we've been in the past soured a little bit by the public, as like, hey, they just make a lot of money and they're here to buy a nice car and go on these great trips. But we care about our patients, and we want people to care about the patients like we do, so they treat people well.
What is it like mentally being the son of a dentist?
I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, I got to see what dad was doing from an early age. So I actually wanted to go into dentistry. Like, honestly, like, I would go in when my dad got emergencies. And this is the funny part. Like, you get that call on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday, and your dad's just like, we got to go in. We got to, like, and again, we always want to help people, right? But it's like, it's never exciting on a Friday night to go into the clinic. But when dad did, he's like, hey, you want to come assist? He's like, I don't have anybody coming in with me. And I'm like, yeah, like, let's do this. And so to me, I was like excited when dad got an emergency because I got to go to the clinic, right? Also, from grade 1 to 4, our school was across the street from the dental clinic. Like, we lived in Ranchlands, our clinic was in Ranchlands, and our school was in Ranchlands, and they were all 100 meters from each other. Like, it was a triangle between school, work, and our house. And so when we finished up school, me and my sister would just walk to the clinic, and mom and dad had to work. Like, it wasn't an option back then, right? Like, I mean, immigrant families, refugees coming to Canada. My parents got kicked out of Uganda with Idi Amin in 50 years ago. They came to Canada as refugees. And so you had to work. You didn't have money coming into it. And because you had to work, your kids had to figure out what that meant. And so I've spent a lot of, hours on a couch in the staff room. We actually had a really nice couch in the staff room back then. And so me and my sister would hang out and play on the couch, right? I mean, mom and dad had to work. And then once they finished, we'd go home. I mean, we had a nanny sometimes, we had help sometimes, but I remember days where we'd just be hanging out on the couch in the staff room. And the staff would all come back and hang out with us. And it was cool.
I think that's awesome that you've been, surrounded by dentistry your entire life. How did you go from, you graduated from University of Pacific, you're now a dentist, you're now working in the family business. How did you decide to branch out of the family business and grow it and grow from one clinic to 2 to 4 to 8? Tell us about that story.
So again, right place, right time. Sometimes, like, we had a doctor friend of ours, a dad's friend, that was opening a medical clinic. And he's like, hey, I want to put a dental clinic and an optometry clinic in the same plaza. Like, well, we've rented out 10,000 square feet. You take 25, we'll take 25, they take 25, optometry takes a little bit less. And we've got 10,000 square feet. Do you want to do it? And dad's like, nah. My dad had actually opened a second clinic by himself. And it was a disaster.
Okay.
Because it's one person running 2 clinics. He had an associate, they ran 1 clinic, and all of a sudden you're just working twice as hard, making the same amount of money with 2 overheads. So he actually ended up giving the clinics to his associate pretty much. I mean, they paid, right now you joke about it, but like $250,000 for a fully functional, dental clinic. But this is back in, say like early 90s, right? Like, it was a long time ago, or late 90s maybe. And so we had the opportunity to open a second clinic. And then we found a really great dentist to join our organization, Jody. So Jody's my first partner. And we then moved her to the new clinic, and she's like, well, can I be a partner? And we're like, yeah. And she went on mat leave. We had another dentist join us, and they're like, this is fantastic. How do we become part of the organization? And we're like, well, you can't. Jody's the partner here. Dad and I and my cousin are the partner at the other place. There's just not. And then it's like, oh, well, the new lease came up somewhere. And they're like, well, do you want to be a partner at a new clinic? And they're like, sure. And then Jody went on another mat leave. We had another dentist join us, and they're like, hey, how do I become a partner? And so we actually built clinics for our associates because we didn't have room for them, and they were amazing. They really were. They're like these great people that we wanted to keep. And so our plan was never to grow, and our plan still isn't. Like, if I talk to you guys and we're like, hey, let's do this in a year and just, update. If we have 18 clinics, we'll have been super successful. And we have 16 clinics, we'll also be super successful. Like, if you talked to me last year, we had 20 clinics. Now we have 18. That's fantastic. Like, it made sense to do what we did to clear up some space for me and for some space for people. And so, we changed things a little bit. And one of the dentists, went out on their own, and it worked perfectly, right? And so, to me, it's not a numbers game. I think a lot of people get caught up in that. And to me, it's a little sad almost, because like, I talk to dentists, they're like, all right, how'd you do this? How do I go from 1 to 5 clinics? And it's like, how are you running one? Like, how successful and how happy are you? What are you doing in your first clinic? Why do you want to own 5? It's like, well, you can do better. And it's like, here's a pet peeve of mine. If you're running dentistry to make money, and you're trying to grow just so you can make more, I have a problem. Like, buy condos. Buy real estate, right? Like, that's what you'll do. If you're doing it because you treat patients really well, you have an amazing team, you have amazing dentists, and you can do more, absolutely, go nuts. But then make sure you turn around and give it back, right? Like, I mean, we met in Peru on a volunteer trip. Like, one of the things for our clinics is, how do we make sure we give back as much as we take? We live in Canada. We're like the luckiest people in this world. And I believe Calgary is like the best city in Canada. So I think I'm like the luckiest city in the luckiest country and luckiest place in the world, right? So like, we're given so much. We won the lottery by living in this country. Like, what are we doing to say thank you? And so it all kind of fit together. And I tell people, more clinics, more hands. Like, we can help more people. And I believe we treat people really well. Like, I believe we do really good quality dentistry and treat people really well. And it's not a numbers game. So to me, I think that's the difference. Is I will never tell you I want to have 25 clinics in the next 5 years. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if I have 25 clinics, sure, but that's not the goal. The goal is not to have more and not to make more. It's to do better. And if that means that we grow, you think about it this way. You take a plant, you water it, you treat it really well. What happens? It grows. right?
Gross.
Like naturally things grow. If you do things the right way, they'll naturally grow, right? I mean, what did your clinic start like, Nikki? And how has it grown over time? And you just built a, you know, a new place. It's like you're doing the right things. It's growing, right? You're treating people well. They come.
I just joke around. I'm just having fun.
Yeah.
And if you can continue to have fun at what you're doing and you're not looking, you know, I still look at the numbers. I can't say that I don't, but you got to have fun in what you're doing. And that's what I always see in you, Jan. You're always having fun and you're building your teams. And I get jealous of you, like looking at your like staff functions. You guys have TREC days, right? You guys call it TREC days?
Yeah. So 3 days.
Yeah, and it's like these huge like staff meetings and they just like there's education. It just looks fun, man. Yeah.
It is. And that's the thing, right? If you're not having fun at work, like what are you doing? Go find another job.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, realistically, go find another job, because to do this 30 to 40 hours a week and just to be like, you know, poking your eyes out doing it, it's just not worth it. We close each office 3 days a week and we do these, you know, like TREC retreats. And so, you know, once a year we close all the offices the same day and we get 200 people together. We have this like great continuing education, but we try not to talk about dentistry. We're not talking about dentistry. We're talking about team development. We're talking about nutrition. We're talking about health. We just finished our spring team development. We do one in the spring, one in the fall, and then one in January. So those are our 3 days. We just finished our spring team development. I talked about positive assumption. So how you go into a situation with that mindset of things are going to be good. I'm going to meet you and this is going to be good. Like, this is going to be a fun podcast. Like, it's going to be good. This is why we're doing it. And we did that for an hour. And then we cooked meals for Made by Mamas, which is a charity that raises, you know, funds for new moms. And so our staff, you know, were forced to listen to me for an hour. I mean, they just don't get they don't get that choice. And then they got to like cook food for the next 3 hours. And that was our 4-hour kind of, you know, team build. And how much fun did they have making meals for people that needed it? And on average, we cooked 400 to 500 servings of food every time we took a group through. We try to put 2 offices together because me doing that 18 times, it just takes a lot of time. But we did it 10 times and I run every single one of them and I'm there with the teams because I love the people that we work with. Like, I mean, that's what makes the difference, right? You like the people you work with. It's funny because like I was talking to, again, one of my buddies, and we go on a staff trip once a year, or we try to. I mean, during COVID, we couldn't, but we go to Mexico with our staff once a year. This year, we only had about 60 people go because, again, people were like, not quite sure, you know, going down to Mexico. And one of my buddies is like, why would you hang out with your staff outside of work? He's like, once I leave the door, he's like, I don't want to see them till 8 o'clock in the morning. Right. And I'm like, dude, it's like my favorite trip of the year. Like, I love going with some of our docs and some of our team members, and we go get to sit on a beach and have a drink. Like, there's no continuing education on this trip. Like, we're just out there to relax and have fun. It's like, you got to love the people you work with.
So like, I understand it's not a numbers game, but then what is it? Because everyone seems to want to consolidate and roll up practices.
Yeah, I think it's a problem. I mean, personally, and it's like, again, me calling the kettle black. Like, it's like, yeah, but I'm not consolidating. We build new clinics. Like, we've bought 2 clinics. We don't really try to buy clinics. We try to build new clinics. Unfortunately, I think that, you know, people are looking at dentistry as a way to consolidate so that they can make more money. And again, I'm not opposed to it if we're doing it for the right reasons and helping people. I was on stage just 2 weeks ago in Vegas at this conference. And it was interesting. I was talking with a great guy. So me and him were co-lecturing, even though we didn't put the lecture necessarily together. It was showing how he'd grown his DSO in 3 years to 40 clinics and how we'd taken 20 years to grow to 18 clinics. And his thing was like, yeah, if we grow it fast enough, we can buy them at 5 or 6 times multiple and we can sell it at 10 times multiple. And look at the like difference we can make. And I'm like, okay. So so I actually stopped him and I said, okay, so you told me your values at the beginning. You had, you know, patience and people and, you know, all of this stuff. And a great guy. I mean, I'm not throwing him under the bus, like an awesome guy. And I was like, which of the values was like profit and roll up? And he's like, well, no, that's not one of our values. And I'm like, so then where does it fall? Because this is a problem that I have in dentistry. And this is the biggest problem that I have, is that most dental clinics have targets and budgets. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a problem. And then they pay bonuses based on targets and budgets. Okay. And then they say, well, we're values based. I'm like, well, which value is profit? Which value is production? Because you can't pay, because how you pay people talks about your values, right? Like, because if I pay you to produce more, then what am I looking for? For you to produce more. Well,
Yeah.
that's what the ultimate goal is. And so we don't have budgets, we don't have targets, and we don't have bonuses. Nowhere. You talk to any of my office managers, and we call them team leads. We don't call them office managers. No targets, no budgets, no bonuses. So what is their goal? Like, so what are they supposed to do when they show up to work? Treat patients well and treat the team well. And again, the one thing that we'll always say, because we have our values like TREC, teamwork, respect, exceptional dentistry, continuous improvement. Teamwork is first. I think the team comes before the patient. And I'll argue that all day long. I have dentists that are like, no, you should put the patient first. I'm like, no, I'll put the team first because the team will take care of the patient. That is ultimately the goal. Richard Branson talks about this, and he says, put your team first. They'll take care of the clients. And we believe that ultimately our goal is to take care of our team and take care of the patients. And guess what? We do make great money. And I don't deny that we make great money. We really do. But it's not because we're asking people to do more. We're not asking people to produce more. We're not asking our hygienists to like, hey, add an extra half a unit every time you do a cleaning so we can get our hygiene numbers up. Like, you hear this stuff and it's like, it's crazy sometimes, right? And so for us, it's like, it's so simple, but nobody listens to me. Like, every DSO I talk to, I'm like, here, I'll tell you how to do it. Just treat patients well and put your team first. And they're like, no, I'll know, but what about the targets? And I'm like, well, throw those out the window. And they're like, well, what about the bonuses? The staff won't work hard if there's not a bonus at the end of the month. I'm like, yeah, they actually will. They'll work harder when you actually take the numbers out. And it's like, how can we just get more patients and treat them really well? The funny thing is they'll actually work harder. Just pay them well. Like, I mean, we're not underpaying staff to have them produce. Pay them well.
That's a good point. And I think that's, like you said, Richard Branson, fellow dyslexic, in fact, says it all the time. Put your employees first. But in this environment where, everyone's trying to consolidate, what value adds can a corp, or not a corp, because I don't even think it's fair to call you a corp, like someone who's collecting or starting clinics, like what value add can you bring to, like, one, the patient, and two, the people that work for you, like the associates in like this group model?
Right. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing, and I hope that the biggest thing, is that we take the stuff that's non-patient facing out of the clinic, right? Because right now, like, your office manager is paying bills and maybe doing payroll, like, or your wife is, or your husband is, or, but realistically, that stuff needs to come out of the office, because the only thing the teams at the office should be working on is each other and the patient. And so our ultimate goal is like payroll done outside the office, bill pay done outside the office, managing the website done outside the office, like, things that aren't patient facing. So if you're not touching a patient or you're not touching the team, take it outside the office, see how you can figure out a way out. And to me, that's what, these service organizations can bring, is that they can take the stuff that the dentists don't like doing, right? Because who likes paying bills? Nobody. Who likes doing payroll? Nobody. Like, so if we can get that stuff out of the office, now our office manager has time to be a part of the office. And here's the thing, again, we call them team leads. All of our team leads sit at the front desk. We don't have a room in the back where we have an office manager. No, like, if there's 4 receptionists and the team lead, they are at the front desk with the rest of the team. They don't go back there. There's no private office for an office manager to go sit in, because what would they do in there? Pay bills, run payroll, like, it doesn't happen. And so for us, we don't have that extra person in the office. We have, they're our best trained receptionists, really, at the end of the day. And so, but we're trying to help on the outside, take stuff off their plates.
I like that model, because you're totally right. Like, my office manager, she's in a back room. Everyone gives her all the shit that piles on her desk because it's payroll. It's all the business stuff that I wish she was in front of patients more than she's in the back room working on that stuff. So I like that. But I wanted to ask you, like, I really admire how you build your teams. What do you look for when you're hiring your team leads, or when you're hiring the people that interact with your patients? Like, is there a system that you have to hire these people, or how do you decide that?
So, I mean, ultimately, no, we don't do personality tests. We don't do like any of that stuff. Here's the thing. go try to find a dental assistant right now. Like virtually impossible, right? Try to find hygienists. Actually, we haven't had a lot of trouble with, but it's hard. And so to me, it's like, here's the challenge: is that we can't actually, like, we don't have 10 applicants and we can say, oh, like, let's get them down to one. We have 2 applicants and you kind of flip a coin and you hope you pick the best one. I mean, it's the honest truth. So what we do is after we hire them, we set up these, TREC days. I spend 4 hours with every new hire. Now, we try to do it in groups. So I don't do 4 hours with every single person we hire, but every quarter I do a new team orientation, and we'll have 5 to 8 people, let's say, because we're growing and some people are turning over and people move. And so there's always turnover, right? I mean, we try to keep our staff for as long as possible, but naturally there's turnover. And so I spend 4 hours with all of our new team members to explain to them why. Like, why do we do things the way that we do? Why do we treat people the way that we do? How do we run team? And these days, like, it was funny because when I was at this conference, somebody's like, how much does it cost you to close 18 offices for 3 days a week? And I'm like, man, I haven't done that calculation because I think it'll scare me if I do. And they're like, would you mind? And I'm like, okay, well, let's just say like 10,000 in production per office per day, and 18 times, and then times 3, and then you're paying staff members to be there. And we calculated it to cost us about $750K to close for 3 days for 18 offices. And somebody's like, that's insane. And I'm like, but we're doing better than you are not closing those 3 days. I'm like, when you take care of your team, and that's it, when you put your team first, they work harder for you. Like, it's just a natural piece. You take care of somebody, they're going to have your back, you're going to have their back. Simon Sinek calls it that circle of safety. What our teams are looking for is to be safe. Create a safe environment for them. Put them first. And when we do that, they're there for us. And so we don't hire differently, but we treat them differently after they're hired. And I wouldn't say we treat them differently than everybody. I'm sure you treat but we put more time and effort into it. Again, 4 hours on my part, 3 days a week here that we're closed. And again, those days, we're not talking about dentistry. We're talking about things that can make their lives better at home with their families, with their kids, with their significant other, setting goals in their personal lives. Because we're not setting goals for the office. We don't have goals for the office. We need personal goals. And so it's what you do once you hire them. It's not in our piece. It's not how we hire them. It's what we do once we hire them.
Nike's spoken to this HR piece so many times, and obviously Nike's growing like 10 employees a month by the sounds of it. Like, he's like every week he checks in and he's just like, oh, I have like 5 more employees than I thought.
That's not a good thing. That means I'm not paying attention.
but he's hired a ton, and obviously you have like 200 employees. And I've just learned from, the select little bit of experience that I have, that gut feel is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard, because it's like, you look in retrospect, right? And you're like, oh man, I should have caught that when it goes poorly. But then when it goes well, you're like, oh man, imagine if I just thrown in the towel with this person, and like the first thing they screwed up on, right? Yeah. Like some of our greatest hires have been the people that have been the worst at their first day. And some of our worst have been the best at the first day.
We're quick to judge, right? We're quick to judge sometimes, right? And so we need to give people time and train them.
So what's your hiring philosophy? Like, what's your HR philosophy? Do you interview? Do you just spend time with people? What's your go-to?
I mean, here again, the challenge is when you need an assistant, you needed them today, right? Like, you don't need them 6 weeks from now. Like, there's not, somebody gives you notice, let's just say, or they say, hey, I'm moving. Like, we had a girl and she's like, yeah, we're moving to Red Deer. And like, when are you moving? She's like, in June. And you're like, dude, it's like middle of May. Like, what do you know what I mean? Like, when did you decide that you're just going to get up and move? And now you're looking for somebody. It's like, yeah, it's a conversation, right? Like, I'm not a big fan of working interviews. I don't mind working interviews. I'm definitely not against them. But I think that, if you meet the person, you can train skill, you can't train personality. And so I'll tell a lot of people, and here's the challenge that I have right now, is that with the number of people we have, I don't get to interview everybody. I used to be able to interview everybody, and I used to love it. Like, I actually like doing the hiring, but I don't necessarily have the time. And some of our offices are just moving quick and they're like, hey, we found somebody. But one of the things I would always tell people is like, look, you're a hygienist, you're an assistant, you're a dentist. My expectation is that you can do your job. Like, I hope you come with a skill set where if you're an assistant, You can make a temporary, you can put on a rubber dam, and we can train some of that. But my expectation is you can do some of those things, but I can't train your personality. And so I need to be able to have the conversation with you. And so what I tell them is like, if we went out for dinner, me, you, a few friends, would we enjoy our time at dinner? Because I'm going to be working with you 8 hours a day. And if I can't enjoy the interaction we have, if it's not fun, like Neki said, then it just work. So it's like our personalities need to work together. And if they work together, I'll teach you everything you need to know. If you can't make a good temporary crown, guess what? We can train that. If you can't put a rubber dam on really fast, we can train that. But I can't train your personality. So, would we enjoy dinner? And that's the question, right? And it's like,
would we enjoy dinner? Yeah.
And that's what's going on in the back of my mind. I mean, I'm telling them that, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, hey, I'm shooting I can't, after 10 minutes, I've run out of things to say to this person. That's a problem, right? Like when I met Neki, like, yeah, I mean, this is like, it's fun. Like it's the first time we hung out, right? Like in Peru, like we all had a great time because everybody there is in the same mindset of helping others. So it's like, you're going to get along with the people on your trip. At least you hope so. They're here doing work and it's socially responsible work. So it's find the people that you get along with and then train them to their skill set. So that's what I'm looking for. I mean, again, I'm not doing all the interviews and some of my staff, I'm not sure that that's exactly what they're looking for, but if I get a chance to interview somebody, I want to talk to them and I want the conversation not to be awkward for 15 to 20 minutes. And if I can get through that, we'd have dinner, right? If it's awkward from the beginning and it's like, oh, so I have to ask 16 million questions to get them to interact with me, that's a problem. Because the patients want, I mean, what does a patient want when they're sitting in the chair waiting for the dentist, the assistant to have a conversation, right? I mean, they're looking for human interaction. So we need people that are good at human interaction.
You're totally right, man. Like I like to hang out with my assistants in like at like the last half an hour of the day, because then you get to like talk to them and it's much more relaxed. I totally see what you're saying. And that's where I see the volunteer aspect, like you kind of alluded to, of your whole organization really come together, is build that camaraderie. But how did you get into going to Central America? Like, I met you in Peru, but like, how did you get on that train of volunteering and bringing your staff to come volunteer? Tell us about that.
So the volunteering part, and if we take the Central America out to start, the volunteering part started when we were young. I mean, just part of the communities that we're in, it was interesting. But as we grew up, volunteering wasn't like something you thought you should do. It was part of what you did. Like, I watched my dad volunteer as I grew up. Like we went to, our background, Ismaili, like there was just always volunteering work done in the community. You always help people. So I always grew up volunteering. Getting on overseas missions trips. I mean, I gotta give credit to one of my partners, Dr. Reddy, Mangela Reddy, who's been a partner now for about close to 15 years with us. She'd been going to Guatemala a couple of times and she's like, you got to come with me. And I'm like, I want to. And then all of a sudden it was like, all right, this year, like I'm single, like I don't have kids, like what's my excuse, right? So we went down to Guatemala and it was like the best thing ever. Like you worked harder than you ever have and you didn't get paid and you didn't care. And you're like, I'll see another patient. Like just put one more patient in the chair. Like there's a lineup outside. Like let's help people, right? Like it was amazing. And so then I started that year, I went on my first trip. And then the next year I went on one trip and something canceled on me and they're like, hey, we're going again. And I'm like, yeah, why don't I do 2 trips? And then Mebs is like, hey, I go with Kindness in Action. Why don't you come on one of my trips? And I'm like, all right, well, I'll go to Guatemala in February. And then I think we're in March, I think is what our trip. I can't remember. It was March or May.
Yeah.
He's like, well, come to Peru with me. And I'm like, all right, like I can handle 2 trips a year. And so I started doing 2 trips a year for 4 years. I was doing 2 trips. And, how lucky was I? And I love telling this story. It's like when you give back without expecting anything, the world gives you some pretty cool stuff. And so going back to the initial start of this whole thing, I met Neki and I met my wife on the same trip. Like here I am going to Peru to do some volunteer work. This is I think my 4th trip overseas. And I'm like, just excited. I've never been to Peru before. We're going to hike Machu Picchu at the end of the trip, but we're going to go work hard in the Amazon. And I met this amazing girl. And funny story, to be completely honest, when she got there, her last name was Muhammad. And then there was this Omar Muhammad. And I'm like, oh, that must be husband and wife, right? Like I was like, that's just what I put together. And like Mebs, who's my partner, he's like, well, that's her brother. And I'm like, okay, can you introduce, like, like, well,
Yeah.
let's hang out, right? But we met on a volunteer trip. Like, if I hadn't done an overseas mission trip to Peru, I may not have these two cute kids that I have at home, right? Like, you don't know what the world's going to give you, but when you just give the world things and you try to do the right things, it's amazing what comes back. And that's what I love about it. Like,
I
it just comes
I
back.
love that mentality, and but like it's just bringing me right back there because once you go with another dentist down and do a mission trip in another part of the world, you're bonded. And like I just ran into Omar. I haven't seen him in 10 years. I saw him at PDC. He just comes up behind me. What's up, man? And you're just right back there. You just give each other a big hug, and you've worked together, and it's like you've been in it together. And we came up with the slogan, like he put it on a t-shirt, no root
Right
tip
now.
left behind. And,
Yeah, no,
and
I
he's
know,
like,
tell it.
Nicky, no root tip left behind. And I'm like, yeah, man. But like, dude, look at how that, like, I know you found your wife there. I guess I found my second love, extractions, down there. But that's where we learned to take out teeth. That's how we learned to be better dentists. That's how we learned to give back. And it becomes a part of our soul and what we want to give back to the world. And so I really recommend every dentist go on these trips. It's such a life changer. Just like you said, you fall right into it, but it just becomes this passion within you that just lights this fire of why we're so passionate about dentistry.
And you can't stop doing
That's
it.
that's my soliloquy.
Totally. And I've got one more crazy story. So like a couple of years after that, I took my wife to Guatemala. She'd never been on one of the Guatemala trips with Dentistry for All. She'd always been on the
Yeah.
kindness and action trips that you'd been on. And lo and behold, we met this pediatric dentist that's going to Tufts University. She's just finishing off her pediatrics. She's from Kuwait, Manar, this great girl. And, we hang out for 10 days in Guatemala. We become great friends. Like, every year I'm messaging her and I'm joking, like, happy birthday. When are you moving to Canada? And no joke, a year and a half ago, she's like, all right, I'm ready. And I'm like, huh? And she's like, I'm going to take my Canadian boards. You got a job? And I'm like, well, yeah, we have 2 pediatric clinics. Like, we need a pediatric dentist. She's like, I'm coming. And I'm like, have you ever been to Canada? She's like, never been to Canada. And I'm like, so you're going to move to Canada? And she's like, I'm going to take my boards. If you can get me like the visa, I'm coming. And you're like, I literally hung out with this person. Me and my wife hung out with Manar for 10 days in Guatemala. And we became best friends in 10 days. She moved like in January. She showed up with 6 cats to Calgary, and she now works with us. And she's coming over for dinner, like tomorrow with her husband. Like it's like unbelievable. Like how can you get somebody to move from Kuwait to Canada after knowing them for 10 days? Go on a volunteer trip with them. Your life will change.
Oh, totally.
And you just said that.
Yeah.
Like it's like those relationships you build in those 2 weeks. It is just unbelievable. So, I mean,
Totally.
great stories. Go on a trip.
And that's where I found Mebs. And I met Mebs as a brand new grad, 2009 in Jalapa, Guatemala. My buddy Carl Martin and we meet Mebs in Jalapa, and Mebs Sayani in Calgary. He has this laugh that you will never be able to get out of your head. And if you can keep a straight face while this guy is laughing, you are soulless. Like this guy has the innate ability to make everyone around him just absolutely love him, and just has this laughter that just warms up your entire day. And that's where I found just these cool dentists, man. And I don't know when I saw Mebs last, but I'm like, man, you really changed my life, because you're just that funny, cool dentist that everyone wants to be around. And he works his ass off on those mission trips, man. He does so much restorative, and you'll see him there 7 p.m. with a headlight, and he's just going nuts there. And I just love him, man. But he's one of your partners. Yeah.
He's one of my partners. Yeah. So I'm hanging out and having lunch with him tomorrow. Yeah. I mean, he's been with Ranchlands for a little over 10 years now. And so it's just, again, you meet some amazing people. I mean, they can't be amazing. They're obviously amazing if they're doing this work, right? If you're given 10 days, 2 weeks of your life to go help other people, you got to be amazing. And so, and it's fun. And like you said, you won't know what it feels like until you experience it. And then you can't stop.
How do you decide where to go and who to go with?
So for us, I mean, I don't know, I'm just ultimately bonded to Dentistry for All. So I will go to Guatemala with Dentistry for All every year. And if I have time, I'll put on a second trip.
Do you guys go to Comatencio?
Yeah,
for Dentistry for All?
Every single year.
Comatencio, yeah.
Yeah. So, and again,
what's that? Is that a city? Is that a town?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't call it a city, a village of sorts, but it's a cool area in Guatemala. And, again, now that I have two kids, my wife Aisha, she's like, you're allowed to go on one trip a year, but you can't go on two a year because it's like it's starting to really eat into family time. But she knows I go on one trip a year, and I love the guy that runs our trip. He's based out of Milwaukee, Shane Fisher. Like, just absolutely love the guy, right? And so if he's putting on a trip, I told him, you're putting on a trip, I will be there every single year you put on a trip. And then if I could do something else, I will. And I like going back to the same areas because we build relationships there. Like, he actually lived in Comey for like 3 or 4 months. So like he just immersed himself in that place. It's like middle of nowhere. But I mean, so he knows the people, he knows the families out there. Like, it's just funny. And so when you go back there year after year, I've been there, I think 7 or 8 times, like you start to make friends. And again, it's crazy. My Spanish still sucks. And I go to Guatemala every year. And I wish every year I come back, I'm like, I'm gonna get better at Spanish. And then I just go back and I just butcher it, and try to get through a few things. But he is fluent, right? Like, he's fluent in Spanish. He can talk to all the locals. And so that's how I do it. I mean, do I want to go with Mebs on another kindness and action trip? Absolutely. But I won't give up my Comey trip. So it's like, I'll only go with Mebs if I can do a second trip. And right now that's not in the cards, but eventually I'll make it back out with Mebs on a trip. I did 4 trips with Mebs because we did Peru, Ecuador, Tibet, and Morocco. And those were like Tibet, Morocco, like some crazy cool experiences.
Yeah, that's the cool part about these trips. You go on these adventures and you go to places you will never be able to get to on your own. Like you go to any city, like in Morocco, you're just going to the capital city, then you'll go to the desert and peace out. But like when you go on these trips, you actually go to what real life Morocco is like. And I still remember in Comatancio, I've been to Comatancio, I think 4 or 5 times now with Change for Children, and we never go at the same time. I know like we both go to Comatancio but go to different places. But I still remember the first time I brought my assistant to Comatancio, it was like 2 a.m. She's hearing some rustling, and then she turns on the light and there's someone in her room, like a drunk dude, climbed through the window and was like sleeping in this hotel, just like sneaking in just because there's a bed there, and like is about to crawl in with my assistant, and she's just screaming at the top of her lungs. And you get these crazy adventures, man, and it's just so much fun. So I highly recommend all dentists. And it's funny because when you get 2 dentists that have been on volunteer trips, you can just sit down all night and you'll hear the craziest things, eh?
Yeah, great stories, right? I mean, exactly. And we've got so many of them, but that's what makes these trips amazing, right? Like, you bond, you got these crazy stories, and it just brings you back together.
Okay, so I'm going to Granada in what is it, 2 months, month and a half, like 20 of my classmates. What is one thing I can do in order to be mindful and intentional when I'm there?
It's a good question. So what are you going for, I guess?
Like a dental service trip.
You're doing a dental service trip. What school?
Yeah. UC.
Yeah, UC. Nice. I mean, I think you just experience it, right? Like, just try to get into the local culture as much as possible. You're going to help people. You're doing a service trip, right? I mean, that you're going out there to help people. But I think, like, try to chat with the locals. Like, try to, like, when you finish off your trip, trying to, have a great time with the people you're with, like spend as much time as you can with them, but try to learn, like try to talk to people and see what their experiences are, like the locals, like what are they going through? What are they experiencing? How can you help them? Because sometimes it's, it's different things that people need, but it's just interesting hearing where they came from, what their families are going through. Like, if you get a chance, visit where they live. Like, sometimes people they'll let you kind of go to their houses. They'll let you come in and see where they live and, where they eat and how they do things. And I think it's such an eye opener, I think, for any of us. And I think especially for a lot of people coming out of Canada that haven't traveled the world, like, if you've been to India, you get to see some pretty crazy stuff, like the slums and the rest that are out there. Like, if you get to travel the world, it really opens your eyes into how lucky we are because, and we joke about this a lot. We have a lot of first world problems. Right? Like, we look at the gas price and we're like, oh man, it's $1.60 a liter. And it's like, I tell my staff this all the time. If you're complaining about, putting gas into your car, be thankful that you have a car, because 99% of the world doesn't have a car, and you probably have 2, right? Like, what are we complaining about? We're complaining that the gas is too expensive, but we get to drive to work. The rest of these people are lucky to have shoes, walking to work or walking to school. Like, you look at these kids, and I just think that we have to put things in perspective, and the only way you can do that is by travel. And so I just think, like, just immerse yourself in the area, like understand how these people live, because it's hard, right? We come back to life and it only lasts so long. You remember these things, but then you get back into your like, can I get a Starbucks? In which, Neki is the luckiest guy in the world because his patients just bring him Starbucks. Like he doesn't have to go buy his own Starbucks. He just has to show up and people just like bring it for him, right? Like, but here's the thing, right? That's a first world problem that we have. Like that's fantastic. But that's not the real world, right? And I think that we just have to balance ourselves out and know how lucky we are to do the things that we do and be able to experience the things that we can, and how we can also help others do that. Because I think we can do both, right? We try to explain this because here's the biggest challenge that I'm trying to figure out right now is how do I instill the same values in my kids? Because we live in a beautiful house and we live in a beautiful area and we get to go to, we were just in Dominican with the kids on a trip, on an all-inclusive. Like, you don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry, like everything's taken care of. And so how do you build that up? And, it was interesting. One day, my older son, probably about a year and a half ago, he's like, Dad, you always go to work. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, we have to go to work, right? And he's like, well, why do you have to go to work? And I'm like, so we can live in this beautiful house and we can help other people. And I want to teach him both because I think both are important. We're allowed to live well working hard. Like, I don't think we should feel bad for what we do as long as we take the time to help others as well. And I think that's where, you need that balance in life. Hey, I can make really good money. I can go on some great trips, but I can go to Guatemala and live in a 1-star resort with cold water and enjoy the experience because I'm helping others. And the one thing that I try to impart to a lot of people that are around us is like, look, not everybody gets to go to Guatemala on a volunteer trip, but what can you do locally in your own backyard? Because we can do a lot of stuff to help people because you either have time or money. And even though we take our staff, like our staff gets the choice. They get to go on a trip to Mexico, go on a trip to Guatemala, or get an RRSP contribution. Those are their 3 choices. And, last year we had 9 of us go down to Guatemala and it was amazing, but I can't take everybody with me. And so what are the other 180 people in the organization going to be able to do to help others? We do that Made by Mama stuff, but that's part of our team development, right? So it's like they are giving their time, but it's kind of organized. How do you make it easy for them to help others? And so we try to every month or 2 create an event or some sort of system that they can help. And so the last one we did, and I always bring this one up because I think it's the easiest one to do, is we always say, hey, who wants to lose 5 or 10 pounds? And I'm like, who doesn't want to lose 5 or 10 pounds, right? Like, yeah, that's me. And we're like, in your closet, go into your closet, take out 5 or 10 pounds of stuff that you're not using. And we just did this last month and we donated hundreds of pounds of stuff to the Women's in Needs Shelter, WINS in Calgary. How hard was that? Not super simple, but it gets everybody in the organization doing something, helping people out. So it's training that whole piece so that, if you can go to Guatemala, come with me. But if you can't go to Guatemala, do something locally. Let's go to the food bank. And so we create events every couple of months in our offices so that people can do something little to feel a part of giving back. And I think that that's what I like to impart on people is that you don't have to do the Guatemala trip. If you can, we'd love to take you. But if you can't, just go down the street, do something locally, like help wherever you can, because there's tons of people that need help.
So Jan, I as we both get older, I think we start to realize why we do things and what's important to us and what, we want to embody and how we want to feel. And I started realizing that when I go on these trips, initially I thought, it's my duty, it's my responsibility to give back. I was so lucky to be born in Canada and get educated. But then I started realizing, am I doing it for the other people or am I doing it for me? And then I started to think, I'm like, you know what, at the end of the day, I think I'm doing it for me because I'm doing it because not out of guilt, but I'm doing it because it makes me feel good. And giving back makes us feel good. Do you think that there's anything wrong with that? Or do you find that that's conflicting in a certain way? Because it is selfish. Giving is selfish. And once you understand that, I feel like you almost give more because it makes you feel so good. You know what I mean?
So here's the thing, and I love that because it does, right? Like you go on these trips and man, you come back with your cup full. Like you are just like, that was the most, I feel amazing coming back. And it's like, man, I help people and I feel amazing. Like, how could you not do that more? Because it's like, look how people win. So here's an interesting thing, and something that we talked to our team about, and I remember, again, I love Simon Sinek, so I just keep, quoting him all the time. But he talked about, like, if I see you, like, if somebody helps somebody else, how many people are affected by that interaction? And you just talked about it, like the person that you helped, like that kid or that mom or whoever you took the tooth out on, that helped them, and then that helped you, because it did. I mean, you got something out of it, and they got something out of it. And then people will ask me, they're like, well, you post a lot about some of the social responsibility stuff you do. Like, why don't you just do it? And so what I tell people is, like, when you see that post, how do you feel? And they're like, well, it makes me feel good. Like, it's cool that you're doing it. Like, I kind of think, how can I do it? And I'm like, exactly. So interestingly enough, what Simon Sinek says is 3 people are affected every time you do something. You're affected because you helped them. They're affected because they got the help. And the person that observed it is affected. But I actually think that he hasn't quite figured it all out. Like, I think there's a 4th level to this that people don't realize. And it's the community that is then affected by that. That dad having that toothache that can't go to the farm to work because he's in pain, you've taken him out of pain so he can go help his family make money. When we go to Comintencio, when you go to put water systems in, you didn't affect one person, you affected hundreds. Like, the entire community has been affected. You've been affected. People, individuals have been affected. And I get to watch you do it. And I'm like, that's Nicky. Like, I love that guy. Right. So it's like, there's 4 different effects that you have, and you need to multiply that. So to me, when you do something to help somebody, shout it out, because I'm going to be like, that's amazing. How can I do a little bit more? Because I saw you do it, and I'm like, you know what? This week, this month, like, I don't really do anything. Like, I just went on a holiday. Like, what can I, and it makes you think. Every time you see somebody doing something that's responsible, I think it makes you think. And so to me, I'm not posting about it so you think that I'm better. I'm posting about it so that you will hopefully get your butt out and do something, right? And so
You're
I talk about
totally
this.
right, but it's such a fine line, because it's almost like, I don't want to be braggy that like, hey, I'm gonna put my arm around this kid, and it's almost becomes like poverty porn. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's I'm trying to build up my social value amongst these people that I don't care about on Instagram by putting
Yeah.
my arm around this kid to, to show how good of a guy I am. But you're right, it does have that unintended consequence of other people thinking, hey, why don't what's wrong with, like, how can I do that? You're totally, I've never thought of it that way, man. I've always
Right.
been hesitant to post.
And that's exactly it. At the beginning, you are hesitant. And when I heard Simon talk about it, he's like, you need to, because it will motivate people. And here's the thing, even if it doesn't motivate them, it makes them feel better. And don't you want people to feel better around you? And it's like, people just see volunteer work and they feel better, even though they don't do anything. Like, that's the crazy part. And it's like, we want to build up society. And, again, I always go back to, what's my why? So my why is motivating people to live well and give back. That's it. So I want you to be healthier, and I want you to be more social responsible. And so when people are like, hey, you want to come talk on something? I'm like, yeah, as long as I can talk a little bit about, some level of wellness and some level of social responsibility, you don't have to pay me. Like, I'll come talk anywhere, because that will change people, right? Like, I was talking about AI with a doctor who's like doing genomic sequencing. And the guy's like, but the reason I'm asking you to speak is because I saw you do this work overseas. Can you bring that in to our conversation? Otherwise, we just get so far down the line of, how do we, like, treat disease? And he's like, we don't even want to treat disease anymore. We want to build healthier people. And I'm like, I love that. So, like, how do we do it? Right. And so it's finding those opportunities. I mean, I got an opportunity to speak on the stage with a couple hundred people because they saw me on LinkedIn doing volunteer work. I mean, what do I really know about AI? Like, I'm a dentist. Like, I mean, yeah, we use AI a little bit, but like, that's not our background. But that's where it takes you, and you get to just shout this out. And so I completely believe in it. Like, we need to shout it out as much as we can and take people, because how do people find out about kindness in action and dentistry for all and change for children? Like, if you don't post about it, I don't know these things exist. Like, I don't even know that you're doing it. So post about it so that I can, either donate a well or go with you on your next trip. And I'm going to post about it so that all of a sudden, this dentist that I don't know is going to be like, hey, how do I come? And it happens all the time. People reach out all the time and say, how do I come? And I'm like, yeah, here's the website. Here's this website. Sign up. I'm not running the trip. I'm just part of it. I help, but you got to talk to these guys. And it's kind of that slow wheel that if you just keep turning it, it just turns a little faster and a little faster. and we can help more and more people. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you should shout it out. I've gotten okay with it. I used to worry about it. Now I don't care anymore, right? Like I just donated blood this week. I put that on Instagram. I'm like, more people need to donate blood. Like, how simple is it to go for 30 minutes? It takes 10 minutes to take the blood out, but it's a 30-minute timeline to donate blood. How are more people not doing that? Why does Canadian Blood Services have an issue with the amount of blood? Like literally, we all have it. You have 2 more glasses of water, the next day that blood is back. It's easy. Go out and do it.
Interesting. Well, okay. I'm mindful of the fact that you kind of have this like dual life, right? Like you're a philanthropist. I don't even know if philanthropist is the right word. I don't even know if I'm using that in the right context, but because all I
He
think
is
of is
totally,
like
man. He's good.
But guilt, all I can think of is like Bill Gates, who just gives money, but you give time, you give your skills, and you give your experience. So I don't know if it's the same context, but you also are a dentist, and both require you to not only subscribe to an idea, but also kind of rally the troops, right? Like you have a team of 200 people, and you have to steer that ship. And on the service front, you also have to, I'm sure you do a lot in terms of like you're doing on this podcast, right? You're speaking to an audience, you're getting people excited, you're posting on Instagram. How do you sort of rally the troops to subscribe to your ideas?
I think people find you. Like, I think that people are naturally attracted to people that are like them or that they want to be like. And so to me, ultimately, if we do this right, we won't have challenges finding staff, right? And again, I'm not doing it for that reason, but the right people will find me, because I tell people when I hire them, again, and I probably didn't talk about this in the interview process, but I'm like, if you're not willing to give at least 1 or 2 days of free work a year, you probably shouldn't join us. Right. And I'm like, if that's not part of your DNA, it doesn't make you a bad person. It just doesn't make you part of our organization. And I talk about that up front, because I don't know that I'm going to need 2 days a year. But if I ask you to come help out and we need to go down, because we used to run the Cups Dental Clinic every Thursday. And so we'd take a team down every Thursday. Unfortunately, the dental clinic hasn't opened up past COVID. It drives me bananas that we can't do more free work in Calgary, because it's hard inside your clinic. I mean, we do free work inside our clinic. Everybody does. But it was nice to have it set up by an outside organization. We'd come in, they'd have a list of patients, and we'd just get to work. Kind of like Guatemala. We would still take our admin down, because sometimes there's some coverage through some social service plan, but other times if there wasn't, we would just do the work. But I want people like that. And I think that they come and find you. I just think that's it. Like, I mean, again, I look at it, and this is why I like what you guys are both posting in this podcast that you're doing. But again, I have this affinity for Neki. I've known him for so long. I follow him. Like, look at the stuff that you're posting. People are going to find you because of what you put out there. And you can only fake it for so long. That's the other thing, right? Like, a lot of people can be like, oh, hey, we're team first. And I'm like, okay, what did you do for your team this month or this year? And they're like, oh, we paid them and we took them on a staff Christmas party. And I'm like, dude, that's just like that's basic. That's not, you didn't put your team first. You paid for a Christmas party. Like, who doesn't pay for a Christmas party, right? Like, and again, it was funny. I was, chatting with this guy in Vegas, and he's like, oh, we did a team development day too, just like you. He's like, but we did it on a Saturday and we invited people to come. And he's like, we got 60% of our people to come out. And I'm like, but that was on their own time. And he's like, yeah. He's like, and look, I was like, that's not it. It's on your time. You got to do stuff for them on your time. I mean, asking them to come to a party on a weekend, that's not that. I mean, come on. Like, I mean, that does nothing. He's like, oh, we paid for a hotel for them and they stayed the night. And I'm like, sorry, man. Like, he's like, and we got a good speaker in, and they learned something. And I'm like, so here's the interesting thing. 60% of people came, 40 didn't. The people that probably needed to hear that speaker on motivation or whatever it was, they're the ones at home.
Right there.
Right? Because the ones that showed up are already motivated, right? The ones that didn't show up are the ones that need the motivation. So you got to close down your clinics and do this. And he's like, oh, I don't know that like the board and my other partners and like the DSO will agree to do something like that. I'm like, exactly. And that's the problem in the world that we live in with consolidation. It is about numbers. It's about multiples. It's about EBITDA. It's about, how we can turn this over to make it bigger. And they miss the point. I truly believe they miss the point, because we do really well not doing those things, and we have fun doing it, and we don't have to have those conversations, and then we can help more people. So it's like, it's a lot simpler than people want to make it out to being. And I think if you uncomplicate life, like treat people well, treat your team well, and help others, like you'll live a really good life. I mean, you have to work hard. I mean, again, we got to go back to that whole, like, you have to have the work ethic too, because that's gonna get you. But you hope that you start there.
Yeah, and I always I knew about you, man. Like, you know, we've been on a trip together. You've grown so much since I've seen you, and you really embody a leader. Like, I really I value this conversation, man. Like, I felt like I should be changing some things about how I lead my own team in my office. And I have a ton of respect for you, Jen. Thank you so much for sharing your philosophy with us, and for sharing your story and how you grew. And if people want to reach out to you, how can they reach you?
You know, I mean, honestly, the best way is LinkedIn or Instagram. So LinkedIn, Jaffer, Instagram, Dr. TREC. I mean, that's the easiest way that we can start a conversation. And then again, you know, always willing to help. Like if people need things, you know, I love when they're reaching out. I mean, I don't like all the people that reach out on LinkedIn about, hey, how can I be your investment advisor? And like literally every day somebody is like, hey, give me 15 minutes of your time. No, but like if we're willing to help others, like let's do it together, right? Like that's where I like the collaboration. Like this guy that reached out and he's like, hey, he's like, let's make this about AI and social responsibility. It's like, I'm there, right? So like, let's figure out how to do things better because we can. And there's a lot of great people out there wanting to do the right things and taking care of people. So yeah, reach out, find me. I'd love to have conversations about this because this is what gets me excited. Like right now, like I'm excited. You know, I'm like talking to Neki. I haven't seen you for a bit, but it's like this is exciting. I love this.
For sure, man. I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. And to all our listeners, I hope you enjoyed it. Have yourselves a great day.
Welcome to the Hi, I'm Neki. Is that a sweater?
Yeah, dude. Dude, it's the Hi, I'm Doctor sweater. Oh, dude, I see you got yours on too. Looking sharp, bro.
Dude, where'd you get yours from?
It was super easy, man. I just went on to our website, www.hiimdoctor.com. That's HIIMDR.com.
We have a website. We must be raking in cash from selling these sweaters.
Dude, we are killing it. I mean, if that includes losing money on every single sweater that we make, I think we're doing really well.
Yeah, Neki and I are donating all proceeds, which is zero, to charity because we are losing money.
I wonder if the charity will pay us. I think we got something here, man. Let's keep on losing money on every sweater.
Alrighty, guys, go check us out. HiI'mDoctor.com.
We'll see ya.